Kia ora, I'm Chelsea Daniels, and this is The Front Page, a daily podcast presented by the New Zealand Herald. Just over 70 years after Sir Edmund Hillary first ascended Mount Everest, the world's highest peak is grappling with new ethical dilemmas. From crowded summit attempts and ecological strain to debates about climate preparedness and the treatment of Sherpas, Everest's story today is just as complex as ever. The Himalayan Trust, founded by Sir Ed and his wife, continues to support local communities at the heart of these challenges. His grandson, Alexander Hillary, now runs the organisation and joins us now on the front page to discuss what respecting Everest means and whether we still do. So, Alexander, has climbing Mount Everest become, I suppose, more of a commercial venture nowadays rather than a personal or spiritual challenge, do you think?
Well, I think it's changed a lot over the years. So when my grandfather first climbed it, there was all sorts of things going on then as well. There was the Commonwealth, but then there was also this sort of curiosity for, achieving the impossible. I think today, in 1990, sort of commercial mountaineering started. So it's a really, really new industry. And I think that's what people talk about when they talk about sort of, climbing Everest is really what's been happening since 1990 to today. And it is becoming quite a very important commercial venture. There's been a lot of sort of negative talk around that. And I think it is important, though, to remember that this has, enormous value, both to the Sherpa people, but also, to mountaineering as a whole, because it's this incredibly iconic thing, climbing Everest. It's the epitome of accomplishment for a lot of people.
Yeah, what has the booming climbing industry, what kind of effect has it had on local Sherpa communities, I guess economically, socially, or culturally even?
Unbelievable. So when my grandfather first arrived, in the Solukhumbu region, which is the Everest region of Nepal. It was the poorest region of one of the poorest countries in the world. So they were subsistence farmers living in a pretty inhospitable place at high altitude. And it was very, very tough living that they were having. So when the Everest industry started, a lot of Nepalis would start working in the industry because you could make a lot of money through it. They were very talented, working at high altitude. They were strong, well acclimatized, but they would go up onto the mountain for a couple of months every year, and they would make, in many cases, and this is the case today, they'll make more in a couple of months than the average national salary of Nepal. So from that perspective, it's well worth the time of getting up onto the mountain and spending a couple of months of hard work there. And it's just meant huge changes. The climbers that are now working on Everest, they own businesses. They have trekking businesses, guiding businesses on Mount Everest. They have lodges, shops, helicopter companies even. And it's just meant that the change in lives and livelihoods in the region is pretty unbelievable.
And you mentioned kind of the commercialability, that's not even a word, but let's pretend it is, from the 1990s onwards. How does social media culture, how has that even changed, I suppose, from the mid-2000s up until now? That need or want or desire or, that bucket list kind of thing of making it up Everest?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because Everest is looked at as it's the tallest mountain, and it's one of these things that we think of as sort of the epitome of accomplishment. But social media has really blown it open and showed us the bit by bit sort of steps to achieve a mountain like Everest. And I think that's opened up a lot of controversy, rubbish, cues, other people. And I think for New Zealanders, it can be quite abrupt to see. We go to the mountains to sort of be at one with nature, to have this experience of solitude and admiration. And that's, often what we see on Everest, at the moment, it's not what we see through social media. But I think there's a lot of sort of misguidedness through the stuff that we're seeing on social media. For instance, one of the famous things in recent years has been the queues on Everest. But only a few days after that famous photo was taken, the mountain was almost empty, and climbers were standing on the summit of Everest just with a couple of their teammates. So there is something quite misleading about that. But it also has, exposed a lot of the sort of more complicated truths of the Everest industry as well.
Hundreds of people now go up every year, and commercial expeditions haven't just significantly increased access to the mountain, they've also increased comforts. There are now luxury expeditions that can cost up to $130,000, offering things like heated tents with dining tables. And at this point, we should probably talk about how all those amenities, and indeed most climbers, get up the mountain, and that's with Sherpas. The overwhelming majority of expeditions rely on Sherpas to do everything from carrying supplies, to putting up tents, to setting the ropes and ladders. They are absolutely integral to commercial expeditions, as this Sherpa will readily tell you.
How many of the clients that you see coming to Everest could do it without you?
I would say 0.
0?
Yeah.
None of them?
None of them.
And do you think that social media gives the impression that anyone can go up there? I mean, you do have to put in the hard yards and train for months before heading to Everest, I would think.
Well, months or years, really. And I think that's where things have gotten a bit wrong, because before 1990, before 2000, this was the pinnacle of achievement of a mountaineer's career. They may have started climbing in their 20s, and then in their late 40s, they finally go, right, I'm gonna go for Everest, and they climb it. And the difference between, in those days when my dad climbed it, they were climbing in a team, but they were each responsible for decisions themselves. They cooked for themselves. They made decisions about snow conditions, about weather, about when to turn back, about how to climb the mountain. Today, that's not happening so much. A lot of that responsibility is being put to guides. And I think that is a bit of an issue, is you've got people showing up to the mountain that haven't put in the work required to turn themselves into a really skilled mountaineer. You need to be a really skilled mountaineer to take on Mount Everest. It's not good enough just to have a very basic understanding of snowcraft. And I think, social media and this whole sort of attitude around the youngest or stuff like that, of being the first person, does sort of stray us away from what mountaineering is really about.
And what is mountaineering really about?
Well, I think that's a different question for each person. But I think mountaineering on its whole is what's so rewarding about mountaineering is it's about the challenge, and it's about proficiency of skills. You have to make decisions around weather, your own personal ability, the snow conditions. And it's about sort of gaining those skills and then putting those skills to practice in the mountain environment and coming out successful and alive. And it's an amazing sport to be involved in. But you need to be careful, because the consequences are incredibly serious, not just for yourself, but for others as well. And I think we need to go back to sort of those roots of mountaineering and remember, what's at stake.
And how do we do that, do you think? Do we restrict people? Do they need a special certificate? I've mountaineered to certificate 5 so I can tackle Everest or something like that. How do we stop people who are so unprepared from giving it a go?
Well, I think, there's a certain amount of sort of rules and regulations that you can solve with this, but ultimately, and Nepal is doing some of that stuff. They're saying you now need to climb a 6,000 meter peak in Nepal before you tackle an 8,000 meter peak. But really, this needs to come from a cultural shift, a shift where we acknowledge that, before you climb Everest, you need to be able to climb Mount Ruapehu, and, be able to do, just take small steps up towards big goals. And remember that, you can't, while it may be extraordinary to go from 0 to 100, from nothing to climbing Everest, it's better to build those skills, build that experience up to an incredible accomplishment. And I think there's something way more rewarding about that journey. than just being able to say I ticked a box, I stood on the summit of Everest.
Yeah, because you see online, don't you, that people are like, well, should we ban it altogether? Is it the end of traveling up Everest? Should we leave it alone or something? But in reality, if a full ban was to take place, the Nepalese community would suffer immensely, right? Like a lot of them require this tourism industry to stay alive.
Absolutely. So, like the Himalayan Trust was set up by my grandfather, and he recognised that there was this great need for sort of education and healthcare, and different infrastructure projects, and we've been working on that for over 60 years. But the other part of that is the economy and industry, and Everest is the centre of that. For the people that we're working with. It's what draws people in, it's what provides tourism jobs, it's what funds and fuels, agriculture and all different trading. So it is really, really critical. But, I sort of think about it, Everest is like, the Milford Sound, for Nepal. We can't just shut it off and say no one's going to go there. It's this. We're both countries that are really lucky to have these really special taonga, these special places of, international, global significance. And we need to learn how to look after them sustainably, to cherish them, and to develop a really good culture around interacting with these spaces. Not sort of having a reactionary sort of, we're going to shut this off or we're going to just totally blow it open. And that's not, I think it's something that comes from rules and regulation. That's something, a cultural shift that we need to create.
Yeah. Do you think that we've lost respect for Mount Everest?
I think maybe a little bit. But I think there are so many people that, love that mountain and have so much respect for the mountain. The Sherpa people, it's of enormous significance. It's Chomolungma. It's the mother goddess of the world. And I think, it is a beautiful mountain, despite everything that gets said about it. It's got so many different, aspects, beautiful routes that haven't been climbed, some of them, and people doing amazing things. And sort of, just recently, Jim Morrison did an incredible first ski descent down off Mount Everest on the north side, which is just this sort of wonderful, hopeful, exciting story of mountaineering and accomplishment, really pushing the envelope of what can be achieved. And it was something that sort of, I guess, honoured the mountain. And I think we need to sort of, really connect with that. And each person that wants to sort of go and climb Everest and embark on that adventure, I think needs to do it from a place of respect, not for themselves, not for a LinkedIn post or sort of a self-promotion thing.
Yeah, like up there with a selfie stick or something.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the effects of high altitude is it's a little bit like having a dose of influenza almost, being at high altitude. A lot of your energy and a lot of your drive tends to be sapped. And people feel fit and able to cope with altitude at different times, even during a single, the few months of an expedition. So obviously you've got to get people who are well acclimatized, who have the drive and the enthusiasm at the right time in order to sort of throw them towards the summit and say, go to it. And it is conceivable, though in actual fact, Tenzing and I were fit throughout the expedition. It would be conceivable that at the start of an expedition there might be a couple of people who would have been more suited to the summit than later on. But I don't think there was much doubt. At the latter stages of the expedition, we were very fit and we were very strong. So we were selected by the expedition leader, who was John Hunt, as the people to put in the final shove.
So you mentioned, obviously, the Himalayan Trust before. Sir Edmund and Louise Hillary founded that in the 1960s. And while everyone obviously connects him to being the first to have reached the summit, to Sir Ed, his greatest achievement was not climbing Everest, but in fact it was helping the people of Nepal. Tell me a little bit about this trust and the work that it does.
Well, yeah, so my grandfather and my grandmother founded it in the 1960s, and the trust essentially over the years has built, schools and hospitals, forestry nurseries, water systems, all sorts of things for the Sherpa people. I should say it's not just Ed; it was lots of Kiwis. from all over New Zealand that would come in, lawyers that would help with different things, builders, doctors, teachers, a whole range of different people that would give their time. And over the years, it's achieved a lot. We've built many, many schools. We're now supporting over 100 schools throughout the region and hospitals as well. And so it's this amazing legacy for New Zealand. New Zealanders have been engaged in this region a huge amount. And I think that's really special. And it was actually amazing to sort of celebrate that connection. We had a visit by the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Winston Peters, earlier this year. I think that was an amazing acknowledgement of that connection, because there's been a huge amount of Kiwis that have contributed a lot to Himalayan communities, and it continues to this day. We continue to support the schools and hospitals, and we're actually partnering at the moment with another amazing sort of New Zealand-based organisation called EduTech, which comes out of Christchurch, Mike and Cheryl Chisholm, and we're building computer labs together. So we've built 50 computer labs in the past 5 years. And I think what's really special about it is it's this sort of quite uniquely Kiwi story of adventure and philanthropy sort of blended together, about going and challenging yourself, doing a big adventure, but also sort of carrying others with you and supporting people. And I think it's a really heartwarming story that a lot of Kiwis can sort of get behind.
Yeah, and I suppose you've been over there a fair few times. What are the people like, and what do they think of New Zealand? Do they know who Sir Ed is?
Ed spent a huge amount of his life, in Nepal, doing all these projects. In fact, he was building a house at one stage before my grandmother died in the region there. And look, they know him very, very fondly, and they know a lot about New Zealand. I think for a lot of Nepalese people, there's a great kinship with Kiwis. And if you say you come from New Zealand, there'll always be this sort of excitement around it, which is really, really wonderful.
I'd love to get over there, but I, for one, know that I will be won't be in mountaineering any mountains or anything. Well, I'll keep my feet firmly on the ground. I guess in your view, lastly, what would make a more ethical, sustainable Everest climbing industry? Say if I gave you 10 years and an unlimited budget.
Well, I think, there's the sustainability of, getting supplies and equipment up onto the mountain safely. And it's really interesting to see what some of the organizations are doing, government organizations in Nepal are doing, using drone technology to try and, get trash off the mountain without having to risk people's lives. So initiatives like that, I think, are really exciting. But ultimately, I think it's really around building up strength in the industry so that these businesses can essentially make sure that their clients have the skills that they need, because that's what's required. And that there is this sort of, I guess, acceptance of the fact that you have to do your apprenticeship. You can't just show up without the skills and rely on someone else to look after you and keep you safe, because at the end of the day, those people also need to keep themselves safe for their families. So I think it's about building that sort of that culture and ensuring that the local people have the ability to stand up and actually say no, you can come back when you've done this and that. And then we'd love to take you up and share this amazing, beautiful mountain with you.
Thanks so much for joining us, Alexander.
Thanks so much.
That's it for this episode of The Front Page. You can read more about today's stories and extensive news coverage at nzherald.co.nz. The Front Page is produced by Jane Yee and Richard Martin, who is also our editor. I'm Chelsea Daniels. Subscribe to The Front Page on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, and tune in tomorrow for another look behind the headlines.